Recently, some lawmakers from the European Parliament visited Jammu and Kashmir, and now the Foreign Minister of Finland has become the first European minister to visit New Delhi after India's move on Jammu and Kashmir. In an exclusive conversation, after his talks with Indian leaders in New Delhi, the Finnish minister told us that the issue of Jammu and Kashmir would best be resolved by India and Pakistan alone. Take a listen in.
Hello and welcome to Beyond World is One. I have with me a very special guest, Pekka Haavisto, Foreign Minister of Finland, to talk about India-Finland relations. Mr. Minister, thank you so much for sparing your time to speak on Beyond World is One. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Mr. Minister, let me start with the obvious question first, your visit to India. And how would you describe the India-Finland ties today? How did your meetings with the foreign and finance ministers go? And also a word, if you will, about your visit to Chennai.
Well, actually, we have very close cooperation nowadays between Finland and India. Of course, it's already historic cooperation. We have had many investments from Finland to India. This time I had it was a nice possibility for me to be part of the inauguration of the new KONE factory in Chennai. We also met actually university people in Chennai. We had a delegation both for business side and university side and so forth. And of course both with the Minister of for Foreign Affairs and Minister of Finance. We had excellent talks today, and Foreign Minister Jaishankar already visited Finland in September, so this is now very frequent.
Mr. Minister, I would assume that environment is a very dear subject for your party, the Green League in particular. Now you are visiting a city which is in the news for the wrong reasons, for the poor environment, what with air pollution worsening and becoming a public health emergency of sorts. Now, I looked up the air quality index this morning. New Delhi recorded an AQI of 332, which is hazardous, but Helsinki was at a low 23, which was very good. Now, I want to ask you about climate change. What can countries around the world, including India, do and collaborate with countries in Europe in general and Finland in particular?
Actually, I'm representing the new Finnish government, and in the government program it starts with the word climate change, and we have committed ourselves to 2035 carbon neutrality in Finland. It means 15 years hard work, and all sectors, traffic, buildings, cities, agriculture, industry, everybody has to do something. But at the same time I can see that actually our private sector and our businesses are very enthusiastic of this goal, and some of these companies have been with us now in India and looking for the new possibilities, more effective energy production, recycling, circular economy, how you could do, you know, the new green investments in India, and a part of our visit to Chennai was also to advocate these companies in India.
Mr. Minister, Finland and Chile have mooted what is known as the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. What is it about? And where would you see India in your scheme of things?
Well, actually, it was sometimes ideas come like that, and Finland and Chile some years ago decided to initiate this kind of project where finance ministers start to advocate actually the fight against the climate change. And suddenly now we have more than 50 countries enjoying. I think the latest who showed interest was China. And today we had an opportunity to present the invitation to the finance minister of India, and she reacted very positively to this. And the idea, of course, that many of the environmental decisions are actually done by the finance minister. True. How to build your taxation and how you work in the international financing institutions and so forth. And this initiative has got now really wind under the wings in a very nice way, and we hope that India will join.
So how soon can we see India become a part of this group?
Well, Minister was already now positive, so I expect that maybe already during the next meetings we could see India on board.
Fair enough. Let's talk a bit about India and Europe relationship in particular, especially life after Brexit, for instance. Now, given the fact that Finland holds the presidency of the EU this year, how do you see the India-Europe ties go from here?
Well, one very important step will be the coming India-EU summit. We expect it already during the first quarter of next year. And it's particularly important for the reason that now there has been a couple of years when this summit have not been taking place. And we have had a regular summit with most big players of Asia, with China, with Japan, and we are of course expecting in the next EU-India summit also good results and also the enhancing the economic cooperation between India and European Union.
And when we talk about India-Europe relations, one outstanding issue is the free trade agreement, which has been in the works for a long, long time now. Your thoughts on the FTA, how optimistic are you as the Finnish foreign minister?
Well, of course, I have to be optimistic in a way that free trade and trade with the rules is very important for us in Finland, and we are an economy that is based on export, import, international trade, and it's also important for European Union. At the same time, of course, I have to say that usually these processes have been long and issues like sustainable development and environment, everything is included nowadays in a trade agreement. So we are in favor of that. We, of course, would think that maybe the first step could be the protection of the investments and this type of agreement. So maybe you can enter piece by piece to this big agreement.
And talking about trade, Mr. Minister, how likely is it that the EU will lower the tariff on automobiles, for instance? Now, the EU was ready to introduce a substantial level of asymmetry to the agreement. Would you like to elaborate on the status of the negotiations as they stand today?
I think it's too early now to go to the details of these agreements, and of course usually the symmetry is better than the asymmetry and so forth, but usually when you are negotiating the deal, then you know you can have different asymmetries which then both sides can accept, but let us wait when our negotiators will be again at the table actively.
And here of late in India we're seeing a new trend of what some people in India call anti-India protests happening across mainland Europe in particular. How would you respond to this allegation or accusation that the EU is perhaps not doing enough to prevent such anti-India protests from happening within the borders of the EU?
Well, of course, we respect the overall principle of freedom of expressing your political views and opinions and so forth. There are demonstrations pro and contra. I just want to refer that when Minister Jaishankar came to Helsinki, there was a big group of fans of India around the inauguration ceremony of the Gandhi statue, and right. I think Minister was also surprised that it was a very positive happening. But of course people can also react to the human rights situations. Kashmir is very much discussed and so forth, and I think the freedom of expression is also a very important principle.
Since you mentioned the subject, what is EU's position, if I might ask, on this issue?
Well, of course we hope that the Kashmir problem will be solved between the partners, between the countries, Pakistan, India. Of course they are holding the key, and I think nobody can replace the countries themselves to find a solution. I also, when discussing with the minister today, I mentioned the issue that it would be good to have maybe international UN observers on the ground, and maybe diplomats from New Delhi could visit the country. Transparency is always a good principle.
Right. Mr. Minister, the Arctic is another area of interest to both India and the EU. How do you see India's presence in the Arctic region? India is an observer in the Arctic Council. So where do you see the relationship with vis-a-vis the Arctic going forward?
Finland is a permanent member of Arctic Council, and we have very much welcomed the role of India as an observer. And we think that actually the Arctic Council has a key role in fighting the climate change, because Arctic areas are the most vulnerable areas. But at the same time we see many parallel issues with India, the issue of the Himalayas. We are speaking about the third pole. When you speak of the Himalaya, the water issues, monsoons, rising of the sea level, all these are also affecting India very strongly. So we are welcoming the common efforts fighting the climate change, and I think we very much welcome India's effort to this direction.
Mr. Minister, I also want to follow up on the first or the inaugural India-Nordic Summit held last year in April in Sweden, Stockholm. Where might the second summit be held and when?
Well, I'm not fully aware if already decisions have been made, but I think it was a very fruitful possibility between Nordic countries and India also to share the views and at least from the Finnish side we have a huge interest to develop our contacts. We already are benefiting of our private sector cooperation, but also our universities are benefiting, and actually we have many Indian experts working in Finland currently.
Mr. Minister, an average Indian would associate Finland with Nokia, with Kone, as you mentioned, Wärtsilä, Kimi Räikkönen, and now, Valtteri Bottas. But I'm curious to ask you, how much of India figures in the mind space of the average Finn? What comes to their mind when they hear or read about India?
Well, if you ask just now, I think many would mention Gandhi, because the new statue is there in a good place in Helsinki. Many people also would maybe refer India as a big democratical power in the world, supporting the multilateral world order, because now sometimes we feel very alone in the world when some big powers are distancing themselves from the multilateral organizations, and India is not doing that. India is our good partner in international cooperation.
Mr. Minister, let's talk a bit about the future of the European Union as you and we in India know about it. Your party, the Green League, is pro-Europe. While will EU 27 remain that way for the foreseeable future? I think it could expand going forward. And if it does indeed enlarge, which countries will likely join the EU going forward?
Well, it's maybe a paradox of the Brexit process that has been this kind of everlasting process, that at the same time actually the support of European Union membership has been getting stronger, not only in Finland but in most of the European Union countries. Actually people have found the benefits of European Union when they see all the troubles now that UK has in leaving European Union. Of course we hope that after Brexit we have still good and working conditions, working relations to UK. But there are two countries that are definitely now wanting to join the talks with the European Union. It's Northern Macedonia and Albania. And Finland is very much actually in favor of EU enlargement to the Balkans, because we think that everything that is inherited from the Yugoslav wars and so forth is something that we should address also as European Union. So we hope that we see the day when the Western Balkans, the whole Western Balkans, is part of European Union.
Mr. Minister, you mentioned North Macedonia and Albania. What about Turkey, for instance? It applied way back in 1987, or Montenegro, 2008, Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina. We can go on, and the Ukraine, for instance, former Soviet republics, Georgia, Moldova, Armenia. The list can, we can go on and on. So, is there a rationale before the EU today, as we speak, how to enlarge the EU going forward? And as you mentioned, North Macedonia and Albania are the most likely contenders going forward as well. What about the other contenders?
Well, I would say the Western Balkans as a whole. Of course, it includes 6 countries: Montenegro, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Albania, and North Macedonia. All of them, but with their own speed. There's not automatic to get in. You have to fulfill all the criteria. But if you look at geographically, it's really part of Europe. It's inside of our community in many ways. Then with the Turkey, Finland was one of those who advocated the talks with Turkey earlier, but of course now we feel that Turkey in many ways has been distancing itself from some of the key values that we have in European Union.
For instance?
There is an issue of human rights are very much in discussions. There is an issue of freedom of media, all these principles, key principles that are there, which are discussed, and but we still, of course, advocate the good cooperation with Turkey, despite of that there has been a delay, long delay on a negotiation on membership.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for sparing your time and talking to Beyond Wollongong. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.